Okay, at this time, it's always fun when I don't have to present and I can call people and I do not tell them what to do. And so Britta is going to be Britta.
Thanks for having me again. Britta Mölnbeck, most of you know me. It's the second time that I'm standing here, and well, I guess because Hans didn't want to do another presentation. So one thing didn't change since last time that I was here. I still can't scroll any better than you can. So I said, okay, what do you do? Well, we had Christmas in July last month, so I thought, let's find some stuff that is a little bit different. The stuff that we don't see, not harder, just different. Because if you look at, like the table here in front of me, which I'm not going to touch now, to not annoy Bast more than necessary. So this is cut out for the mobile. I made this for a little child, so it's food coloring, red, green, a little segmentation work. That's totally normal scroll saw with something, in this case acrylic paint. Here too, there's some acrylic paint on this Biene Maya. So this is what we see more of. It's not easier or harder, it's just something we are more used to. I mean, we see some fabulous intarsia work here with segmentation. That's obviously the easier part, because combination with paint. Yeah, that's better. So, I decided creativity. That's really what I'm trying to share here, because creativity is contagious. Pass it on. I wish I were as creative as the gentleman who said this, because it was Albert Einstein. Obviously not going to compete with that one. But nevertheless thought I'd give you maybe a couple more ideas what can happen before Christmas, because Christmas is coming. We saw some great stuff last month. Maybe some inspirations for you to keep going with other ideas that you haven't done before. So we're going to start with scrolling and burning, scroll and heat transfer, gold leaf and food coloring, scrolling and fabric, Swarovski crystals, burning and color pencil, beads, and the very end just a short list of where did my ideas come from. To make it again simple for us, let's start with scrolling and burning.
Stand it up.
Stand it up. Does that work? Okay. So, simple notebook, and you might have seen something very similar if you're on Steve Good's email list, because he had this idea out there how to make a very simple notebook out of 2 pages of plywood, put the paper into it. He uses in addition those little metal rings, which I personally don't like, hence I'm using either cord or leather bands, but that's just a question what one likes more or not. So I thought, how do you combine scroll work with some paragraphy here? You start with a pattern. You have to have ideas. So in this case, my ideas for the pattern came all from the internet. Google Image is your friend if you start looking for Celtic knots, corners and stuff like that. It's all out there, it's not protected, there are no, it's not that you step on anybody's feet if you pull it off, because it's really, this is the kind of stuff that's out there in mass since a long time, which is good, because you don't want to infringe on anything. So first step for me was the typical good blue painter's tape. Everybody is familiar with that. Prep my pieces of plywood and get the pattern transferred. Because here you can see this is a part that I'm going to scroll, right, that I'm going to burn. So I need to get, similar to scrolling, the pattern onto the wood. And in this case, everybody can identify what that is. A simple iron. And you just heat it up, put it upside down on it, and you transfer it to the wood. Works really well with such simple black and white contrast. I'm not going to describe how I scrolled that, because again, we guys know how that happens, so it's not magic. But you can see here the area where I started with the burning. It's really a work in progress. You start with the outlines. And if you look at those down here, you can clearly see it's just the outline. So that's when my thought process, that's where I really had planned to stop at the beginning. I thought, well, nice, but really not convincing yet. So I started to give it some more shaping. So adding the darker areas where it goes under and the lighter areas with that where it goes over to give it more of the three-dimensional feel, even so it's obviously two-dimensional only. And end result, whoops, that's one too far. End result is what you can see here, maybe, yes, which is using a blue backer from felt, just to protect the scrolling and the paper on the other end. Just a little something, pretty easy to make, very simple. Christmas for your grandchildren, you're in good shape. And now we're coming to another version, and this is scrolling and the heat transfer, which is exactly what I did in the first round with just a very simple pattern. In this case, nevertheless, with a far more complex pattern. So what do you need for doing this? Pretty much the same thing that you needed for the first one. You need the wood, you need the paper for in the inside, you need some felt, and you need an iron. And it's on, I think setting is 3, it has 1, 2, 3, something like that, as hot as it gets. That's what you want to use. So same logic here, you start with the scrolling, nothing magic about it, and you find a pattern you want to combine that with. And again, in my case, the internet is my friend. I went just through, I have to admit, this was reiteration number, I don't know, 5 roughly, because what I really wanted to use was a picture I took of a thistle in a park here in Atlanta. It was so gorgeous, contrast between purple, green, and everything. And I wanted to use a different method, but it just didn't work out. And I tried 3 times, and I don't know how often I sent it that piece of plywood, but I decided, okay, the last one has to be it, because if not, I'm through. So I went with the heat transfer. So you can see the pattern from the internet. This pattern has text on it. Notice that? So if you want to do a heat transfer with text, you have to mirror your printed image. Yes, you have to, because if you don't do that, it's mirrored on your wood. Because obviously what you do is this, right? You put it around and place it on. So here you can see it, the paper is literally upside down on the wood. You take the iron, make it hot, really hot, and just heat up the whole surface. And you put a little bit of pressure on it, not enough to break the iron, please. Your esteemed other won't like that, because you can really use the one that's in the household. There's no risk that you ruin the iron with that. But you just scrape slightly around, make it hot, make every single spot hot. You can lift it up at the side, look underneath, and put it back down, and keep doing it if you can't see it. And this, in this case, is the end result that remains on the paper.
You got a question?
Yeah, just for some reason I ran across heat transferring this weekend when I was looking around the internet, and it has to be a laser jet printer. It cannot be an inkjet.
No
printer.
inkjet. It has to be laser jet. The copy machines, inkjet does not work.
Yeah.
So I tried, before I tried the heat transfer for this specific project, I tried a transfer with acetone, which is supposed to work with inkjet and laser jet. Believe me, it didn't work for either for me. That was 2 of those that I sent it off. It just did not work out. I have no idea.
Did it bleed around the edges or something like that?
Pardon?
Did it bleed around the edges?
It wasn't just bleeding, it just didn't transfer.
It doesn't transfer.
It just
Okay.
couldn't get in. I had seen a couple of YouTube videos and it looked so awfully simple. It was painfully simple. It didn't work. I just couldn't make it happen, so I went back to the heat transfer. Another version, even so this is not a piece of wood, but a piece of stone. What you can do, you can use this funny stuff, and you can use it on wood equally as on stone. It's called Mod Podge. You put it on your... You put it on the wood, let it dry, put it on your piece of paper, and again, on the surface of the paper, you reverse the paper on it, you rub it on, like with a credit card, just to make sure it sticks tightly, let it dry, and you use water to dissolve the paper and the ink has transferred. That's one way of doing it as well. So, just ideas to play around with. Any questions to the heat transfer? Oh, by the way, yes, there's a backside to this as well. Sorry. That was just like, it's too plain and boring, there needs to be something. So you can really literally use the book from one side as much as from the other one.
Show them the inside. Why, when I'm saying the reason behind it.
Well, the inside on one side, obviously the paper that you put inside is not mirrored top down, it has a top and a bottom. If you turn it around, so
That's not quite, where your hand is. You did that, so you would have, that would accent your carving on.
Right, it's double purpose literally. It's on one side it accents the cutout, on the other side it protects this as well. I mean, this is really a simple one, and I know some of you can do the most intricate thread work. You don't really want to do it on a piece like that, because this is for use. I mean, I use one every day, I throw it in my bag, it shuffles around, it gets tossed around, and if it's too delicate, it will break. So first time the felt behind it will protect it to some degree, but stick to somewhat simpler cutouts, because if you really go for delicate, it will break off because you use it. And if somebody can't use it because it's so delicate, it's kind of not making the purpose, because this is really supposed to be something to be used and to be loved on. Was that the part?
Then you said you dissolve the paper?
Yes, you could take this piece, you could take a piece of paper like that with a printout. You put one layer of Mod Podge thin on your medium, wood, stone, whatever, let it dry. So you take the paper, thin film of the Mod Podge on the paper, put it on your medium. So same logic, please reverse if you have letters on the mirror image, and let it dry again after, pushing it tightly enough, as I said, with a credit card or so that you have sure it's really sticking, because that stuff sticks, literally, it's like glue. Stick it on, you wait till it's dry, a couple of hours. And then you very carefully come from the back side of the paper, like look at like this, and start dissolving with very little water the paper. So you carefully rub the paper off, which transfers the ink, or the ink remains in the Mod Podge, it sticks to the wood or to your medium, and the paper is gone.
So it's not any special paper?
It's not special paper, just ordinary copy paper.
If you're over 40 years old, you remember decoupage. I don't know if you remember decoupage, but it's the same thing.
I am over 40 years old, I do not, but that might be a cultural background thingy. But yeah, I mean, this is nothing new, this
You're
stuff.
gluing the ink to the object and then you're dissolving the
Yeah.
paper away.
So where I personally, I like it a lot on the stone, especially on this light colored stone. I did not like it on my plywood, because I'm a fan of seeing the wood and the grain and everything, and this with the paper, I still, even after having removed the paper, I had still the feeling there's some paper left. Even so, you couldn't really see it, but it just didn't feel right to me. That was one other attempt that got sanded off.
How do you reverse the picture so you get the print one?
But,
How do you reverse the pictures?
well, it depends obviously what tool you, or what, where you get your pattern from. Like this pattern, or most of my pattern I do in PowerPoint, because I have the software at hand and it's one thing I'm more comfortable with. You have a function where you just flip it. So I'm sure there are other tools that have a different way of doing it, but like in this case you load it up as a JPEG or a GIF, you can just flip it literally.
When you put the Mod Podge on the paper, you do not let it dry. You put it on wet.
Yes, and then you let it dry.
On your static stratus, but you let it dry.
Yes, you
Wet
let that
is-
first dry, so there is a layer, then you put the wet on.
This is wet, put it together.
Just touch it tightly and let it dry, and then you start remove. So this was the idea. What else can I combine with scrolling? this case, I said, you know what? Gold leaf and food coloring. Food coloring, I had these little guys out here earlier on. This is food coloring. Roughly $6, $7 out of the store. So, what did I use for this project? A piece of barnwood, just simply because I'm going to put them out again, okay? A pattern, a second piece of wood, as you can see here. Pretty much the only requirement has to be somewhat of the same thickness than your base wood. As you can see, if you look from the side, I think that should work. That's the stars that you can see on top are pretty much the same thickness as the barnwood itself. It's not rocket science, it's not totally tight, but it's pretty much the same, so it doesn't look not fitting to each other. What you need are tweezers, and you will see later on why. You need some gold flakes, and you need the food coloring, and obviously glue. So, how did I cut out those stars? Because this is the natural edge of the barnwood. Well, this was a little bit of plenty of use of painter's tape. And this was the other piece of wood used. So the idea was really take the barnwood as it was. You can see this here on the pictures. And glue it, not glue, tape the other piece of wood on top of it. So that they have a common line. So somewhere, that's the right way around or the other way around. Most likely the other way around. Well, you get the idea. So if you really, that's the way, tape it together. So you're cutting, in some areas when you're cutting through both boards. And in some areas you're just cutting through the light colored board because you're trying to create stars that then can stand out from the natural edge of the piece of wood. These are the cutouts that were left over. So you can see those pieces are the ones that are cut out where I was cutting into two pieces of wood, and the rest just stands out. Look at this, I think that explains it pretty well. That you have the stars that came out of the light colored wood and the original piece of barnwood. So this is kind of a nice contrast you can create there. And then I thought, okay, how can we make this now fancy? And that's an idea that I took out of a magazine called Feinschnitt Kreativ. Let's put it behind there before bus goes after me. Because I'm throwing it around. Which is not exactly what they did there, but they had this usage of gold leaf, and I thought, you know what, I can take this idea and run a little bit somewhere different with it, but it's clearly the inspiration for it, so they get credit for that. You can see my little stars here, and I said, well, how do I make my little stars golden? I tell you, hold your breath, and I do mean that. Switch your AC off, hold your breath, and do close your windows, because yep, it's in here. It's, believe me, in a plastic bag, and I'm not gonna open it because that stuff is so light, it flies, and it makes you're not gonna catch it again once it's gone. And that's the part too where you will need the tweezers, because you put glue on the wood. In my case, I used this little glue sticks, I think you call them. So once you would in school,
Yeah.
little glue stick, simply put it onto the wood for the first one. The second one I did with a Mod Podge that worked as well. Take the tweezers and really apply the little wood flakes, the little gold flakes that are in there. Let it dry, and then I finished it with the Mod Podge again, which again, has a gluing capacity in it to really make sure that you can touch it afterwards without losing all the flakes again. Now, to get even more color into it, I used the food coloring, which I showed you earlier on, which is 7, 8 bucks, 6, 7, 8 bucks, some of that ballpark. Publix, Kroger, they all have this. These are little tiny containers with gel in there. Reaches forever, so you really need like, I don't know, less than a cent amount for a bucket of water. Well, not yet that much, but for the approach here, half, tiny little bit dissolved in water, and the coloring, as you could see earlier, can be rather intense. And it's safe, it's nice to play around with. Here my suggestion is wear gloves. I mean, this time I knew this. The first time when I did the mobile like a year ago, I started with red. I had this red stain on my hands for days and I could not get it off. So,
Coating on that?
yes, I coated that with the Mod Podge.
Okay.
Because I wanted, because it leaves, even if the glue is dry underneath, you still have this leafy, and I think it's visible here, if you look at the edges there. You still have this flaky surface, so you want to seal this, because if you leave it like that, every time you touch it, something will break. I bought it a long time ago, but I don't think it was more than $10, $15. Somewhere Amazon is your friend, and again, it's a whole bag in there. And unless you really, I mean, it's like glitter spray, I think, just maybe a little bit more work to put it on than the glitter spray. But it's definitely affordable. It's not outlandish. But as you can see here right now in the nice piece, gold spray is definitely a way. I'm pretty sure the gold spray is easier to apply. Yeah.
Did you pick the flakes over the foil because that's what you had?
That's what this is, it's foil. I
Well,
think.
yeah, I had those, exactly. So they were, as I said, sitting around since a while. So that's why I used them. And yeah, I don't know why I bought the flakes in the first place versus the foil. It's just, try something. Most likely it was cheaper. It was something you try out. I mean, you never know if it works out. I'm pretty sure the foil pieces are more expensive than the loose flakes. But $6.99 for the bag, I mean, can't do much wrong with it, right? Very nice. So, another idea was, can I combine scrolling, well, that thing stands on its own, I guess, with fabric? Just to have, again, another medium combined with, which I hadn't really seen before. Yeah, that's better. So, went for the 2x4 contest, so it might have been a 2x6, I don't know, but it's simple to Home Depot wood, because I wasn't sure how this would turn out, and I'm not going to take any expensive wood for that, that's for sure. Very, very simple logic. Take a piece of wood, cut your pattern out, cut an inner shape out that you like. Suggestion on my side is don't take one with too many tiny corners, because then you're going to be in, I glue the fabric on hell. It takes a little bit more effort, but the 5 stars here, that was still a pretty decent way of going. Picked my pattern, which I wanted a star. Picked a piece of fabric that I simply laying around, just very simple cotton fabric, or you can use something with more texture, something thicker, something thinner, really just what flies your boat. Cut the shape out of that's the inner piece obviously. Use glue, cut the star as well out of the fabric. Make sure you have enough overlap on the edges, because you don't want to have the, sorry, I'm back. You don't want the edges here to come through or have the ends of the fabric hanging out there. That wouldn't look good. You want it all nicely hidden inside. So you really make sure you have some overlap. Glue it on. Oops. And push it back in. So that was extremely simple, and that might be my entry for the 2x4 contest. If I can't come up with anything else. Another little project, literally. How do we do this now? Stolzhorn Swarovski crystals. Not my typical style, I have to say, but I thought I'd give it a try anyway. And those little ones are really little. They are tiny. Let me give this one around too. So, piece of wood, and as you might have noticed, that's the same piece of wood here, and you will see it, I think, in the next 3 projects. Mainly to one reason, it's lovely wood, but don't know, can you see this from the side? It's so cupped, it's not even fun anymore. That way around. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's everything but straight, right? So it gets used for all the tiny little projects that I have. Because of this size, it totally doesn't matter if it's cupped or not, because the size is going down. Very simple concept here. Again, if you have granddaughters, wives that are a little bit more into the glitter, come up with a simple piece of wood. Simple pattern, again, pattern created in PowerPoint. So just, I wanted something with star and moon so the sparkle comes out. Drill, cut it out, drill the holes in accordance to the size of the crystals you're using. So measure them first, try it out on a test piece. You need tweezers. You definitely do need them. I think I have some dexterity in my fingers, but this wasn't really that much fun. It was very tiny. Important too, you have to have more crystals than holes you have drilled. Because if you drop one, you are not going to find it anymore. And the magnet ain't going to help either. So it's not that you can start searching on the shop floor. And second suggestion, just don't do it in your shop. Because at least mine is not clean enough to even think about looking at the floor once I dropped the first one. So I moved it into a little bit cleaner house environment from there on. You have to finish the wood before you glue the crystals in. You don't want any spray or whatever on the crystal, right? So, because they are finished, they don't need protection. So make sure whatever you want to do to your wood, you do before you get to that point. You use the tweezers very carefully. You can see too, this is really pretty much my, how do I poke them in there once they are sitting on top of the hole. Source for this, Fire Mountain Gems. They're just, I don't know, 12 for $1, $2 something. I think they were on a sale where they were rotten cheap just to try things out. But they are tiny. You can hand those through. Who wants to start? Come on, one of you.
Britta, in that case, do you use a toothpick and take your glue and put it in the hole before
Yes.
you put the crystal in there?
Well, this wasn't a toothpick, but one of those barbecue stickies.
Okay,
Yes,
skewer.
exactly same skewer, that's the word, sorry. Exactly that. I had a drop of glue on the paper, stuck into and dropped it in there because you need minimal amounts. It's a tight fit anyway, but you want it glued so they don't fall out. And just a tiny little bit really on that tip. You could use a needle, I think, for the same purpose, just so you have something underneath. Absolutely. But yeah, you could make earrings out of those. Maybe a little smaller. Yeah. A little bit heavy. Rob?
Do you have one there you can actually show us the size? Looking up there, it's hard to picture you're talking about earrings or a necklace because you can't really see how big you've got it.
It's coming around
Oh,
right
okay. I
before
didn't see
you.
it yet. Okay.
So it's really,
More of a pendant or necklace.
yeah, pendant, or you can hang it somewhere. But it's, I think I don't want it on my ears because it might be a little bit too big. So, and another one where we are going for scrolling. How do we do this one now? Sorry. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's standing. See, that little thing has legs, so it can stand. So, I made this little guy last year and don't have the real one to show anymore because I gave them both away. I made this one this year. This is a pattern from Laura Irish. Search on the internet and the link is in the last page as well. She had some very nice ideas for pyrography mainly. However, combination here for me was, okay, we have the scrolling where you create the pattern, and it's, funny enough, it's the same wood, because again, you need small pieces, the cupping doesn't really matter. You need some graphite paper for transferring the pattern, or theoretically you could do a heat transfer as well. You need some pencils to give it color. It was a whole toy box full of fun. At some point they had it nice and reduced, I think, at the Michaels or so, and then you use their 50% off coupon that they have once in a while, then they become affordable, thinking, oh yeah, it's worthwhile to buy a box. So it's really the things you need, cutting it out. This was the original pattern. And then you can go through the process, how this little guy developed over time. Start with the raw wood, and you have a transfer of the pattern, which in this case, or of the outlines. In this case, I use the graphite paper for, which is sitting somewhere here as well. So you take a pencil and just draw the lines. Then you outline with your burner. You do more of the finer shades and shadows on it with the burner. And then you use a colored pencil to add the touch of life into it to give it color. And just for maybe some of you haven't seen a wood burner before or pyrography, I got one maybe like a year ago, a little more than a year ago. There was a lady selling pretty much everything she had. Nice big bundle and the burner and another entry for my 2x4 contest, I guess. Just a little holder for the tips. Oh, Buzz, I'm so sorry. Oops. It's a really little neat machine. You just plug it in, it heats up. You can put 2 burners on there, so you can switch tips without having to unscrew them, put them back in. Works like a charm, and it's a total overkill for what I do with it, but it's nice to have. It's really a very lovely toy. So,
I think that what the main purpose of the wood burning, it does accent it some, but also it defines your coloring location. It defines that coloring location and keeps it from moving from one area to another. You know.
Well, not really. It's because you have a pencil, right? I mean, these are pencils, so you can very well define where you go with them. So it's really, in this case, not that much an issue. So you could use a pencil for it or a fine line pen for it as well. I think the difference is you get a little bit more literal texture, because if you touch it, you can feel the difference of the burned and unburned areas. But could you do it? I think, yeah.
You'd have to seal it first, because if you take any type of ink or something like that, it's going to bleed into the wood. So you got to have some way of keeping it from taking.
Well, you have before you burn, you don't want to put anything on the wood,
right?
Because you don't want to heat that up and breathe it in.
I think he's talking about if
No, I'm saying if you don't burn, you just want to get the
Use an ink pen.
You have to.
Then you would have to seal, yeah, most likely with at least a sanding sealer.
Yeah.
And that's, no, I don't. In this case, as those don't bleed, I mean, they're pencils. But as soon as you had an ink, yeah, you should at least a sanding sealer first. But before you burn, you don't use anything because you really don't want the chemicals. It's just not a good idea. And just to extend on the pyrography part, I mean, somebody had mentioned a couple of weeks ago here that there's a leather shop close by, and as I was early enough, I found it pretty much across the road. It's really across the street there. And I bought some rest pieces of hide that is vegetable tanned. So that's going to be an area too where I'm going to try to do some burning on. So no scrolling on leather, I guess, but at least the burning piece. But again, there I'm looking for the vegetable tan because I don't want to breathe in any of the chemicals they use for the tanning process normally and heat it up. It's just not healthy. That's the only tip I use to make the little teddy bear, because honestly, I'm not really good at that. You see some pieces out there, they're fantastic. I'm a royal beginner, but even for a beginner who can't draw a stickman for its life, I still was able to create that little teddy bear. And you see too, there was a sample, right? So, but it's rather simple, but the more surface the tips themselves have, the more it goes into the shading area. You really can create, I mean, some people have huge pictures with a black background, and the whole background is done with those shading tips. And the back had come loose.
Oh, yeah.
this was another toying around with something different. I wanted to get something more into there with texture, with like the shadow box idea. How do we get from simple just fretwork, which can be highly complicated, don't get me wrong, to combine it with something else, make some more picture out of it. So the wood is exactly the same as you have seen before, because again, it didn't really matter that it's cupped. The beads are really literally stolen from a teddy bear. That teddy bear is sitting around in our bedroom since many years with a bunch of beads around its neck, and I thought, oh, they look like they would work for that. So you can see these are the leftovers of the beads. But just strings of simple beads. You can pretty much take whatever you want. You need a backer. You can see here, that's just simple plywood, painted black or sprayed black in that case, because I needed a black background. And here's the same idea. The motive is Google Images. Fleur de Lille, I mean, it's nothing protected about. You find hundreds out there. Take one, find a size you like, or find another, create one you like, create a backer for it somewhat smaller, obviously, than your front plate. Because you don't want, if somebody looks from the side or from a angle, immediately see the life behind it. Because there is obviously some life behind it. It's still holding, Hans. Good job. So, I mean, I love this wood, I have to say that. The grain is just, I would nearly say it's wood porn for me, but I could look at that all the time. So I tried to find a pattern as well that keeps me with some of the nice grain, because I didn't just want to have fretwork, I couldn't see the grain anymore, then I can use plywood as well. Then I started with the beads. That's where I really thought, okay, how do I get those beads behind there without them coming out right, left, top, bottom, but from the pattern idea still that it looks, if you look at it even in the slight angle, that you have full coverage. So the black back, the black back.
Okay, easy to use that.
The black board, that thing there, this little board painted in black. Glue applied to it, in this case spray glue, because I had to find something that is really sticky enough, not drying too fast, because it takes a moment till you get all nicely your pearls lined up in this case, but gives me the chance to really get it on. So I put the long strands, glued it on it, waited it dry, took the X-Acto knife to cut the ends off. And as you can see, this is somewhat shaped in the same way as the real piece, because there's no need to have beads in those corners, because you're not going to see it anyway, because there's the two corners up here.
What's the final use for that?
Hang it on the wall.
Hanging on the wall?
But I mean, yeah, that's really something. I mean, in this case, I put a hanger behind it. So there is really no practical use. That's sheer decoration, nothing else.
Were those beads still strung when you put them on, or were they individual?
They are strong. Yeah, no. No. They might not fly as well as the gold leaves, but no, they were nicely strung. They were literally the round strings still when I took them. I just cut pieces off, and it's a lot easier when they're still connected to each other, because trying to line them up in single pieces, that they wouldn't be that straight. They would be all over the place by now. No. So, but what really, and when you see the little piece of dowel here, because obviously you need a distance, right? It's not just sticking the backer behind it. You need the distance to the beads, because you don't want the wood on the beads directly. I don't know if you can see this there, but that you can pretty much look through, and you can see how cut the board is. So I took a little dowel, painted it black on the outside, so make sure you don't see it. Cut 4 pieces with the handsaw. I could have used the scroll saw for that as well, I guess. Glued it to the backer board with wood glue, because thinking, well, this is a straight, that was plywood, that was straight, contrary to this one. This is, by the way, the piece that broke, or not broke off, but where the glue came apart on the way here. And then had a good reason to buy a heat glue gun, which I never had one before, never used one before, but seeing Hans toying around with it and making a mess in front of everybody, I thought I need something like that. To make sure that I can stick the upper end to the board, because trying to adjust the dowel end to the point of cutting my wood hairs was just more than I even want to try. That side is still working, the other side came loose. But what I really think is you have endless opportunities using that principle. I mean, Fleur de Lille and or New Orleans beads are not necessarily something for everybody, but it was just something that was there, and if it wouldn't have worked, my goodness, I wouldn't have missed those beads either. But I was thinking, okay, if you have somebody in your family who runs, you can take a piece of wood, create a cutout where you have maybe an indication of a finish line at the end, you have a runner up front, and your background would like a race bib. You know what a race bib is, right? Those funny things when you go. Something like that would be a fantastic memory piece. Or if they even ran a race and have the bib and the medal, which many people keep, would be a nice way to showcase that, use it and put the medal either up front or even in the background as well. Or you can take a flower cutout and put dried flowers behind it. I don't know how you call it in English, but well, when we were younger, we put them in between paper and write them out. So you can do things like that. So just toy around with it. Take a beach-themed cutout and put some shells or glue some sand on a bagger and put it behind there. So just really to create more of a picture, more of a structure, texture to the items that contrasts to whatever kind of wood you're using. I think a bicycle, if you have anybody in your family or yourself who rides a bike, take a cutout with a bicycle rider and put the tire pieces or things like that into the background. I mean, the opportunities are really endless. It's a little bit the idea of a shadow box, where you really can toy around with whatever literally comes around. There are very few limitations if you start tossing it around. This is list of inspiration and resources, because this were all the projects I had for today. Unless I forgot something, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Obviously the internet. Just looking at things and then tossing them up in the air and coming up with something might be totally different but inspired by. Google Images, I think it's just type something in and there's so many, for me it's information overload sometimes, so many ideas that pop through my head if I look at things. It's like, oh, I never have enough time to do this. Obviously, Steve Good's page, you have seen the notebooks. The original idea of the notebooks was his, and I'm definitely not taking credit for that. Fire Mountain Gems is my source for those little funny things, or, well, you might remember this piece, that's the one that Hans cut for me last time. Right, Hans? The beads on here, this kind of stuff, the leather cord comes from them. Laura is Irish, that was the teddy bear and the little Santa. So you can see I took the Santa head off the teddy bear because it wasn't Christmas time yet for me. But she has some really nice pattern, and these were free patterns on her page. So very nice thing to use. And then I heard up earlier on, there is this nice German magazine for woodworking, or for scroll sewing specifically, not for woodworking. Feinschnitt Kreativ. Yeah, it's in German, I know. But the pictures are pretty self-explanatory in most cases, and they describe very well in the whole process how to sand and how to do this and that. But I think just with the pictures and the patterns that are in there, it's different stuff. It's different inspiration than what you see from a Sume or a Steve Good. Not better, not anything, just a very different approach. And I think just looking at the pictures gets me like, oh yeah, I want to do this, I want to do this, and I could change this, and information overload. You know what I mean, right?
Do they have both physical and an online magazine?
They do have the physical magazines. They have a web page, but the page does not have the same patterns, or so that you could buy them all. You really, to get it, they have some free patterns out there, and they give you these teasers for their paper magazines. But overall, the real source for them is the paper magazine.
You can bring us your old ones.
I'm not going to part with those, I have to say. I'm so sorry.
The ones she's using are like 2015 and 14.
Yeah, that's the only ones I have. but I have to buy, at one time, I mean, it was a while ago before I visited my parents, I had found them on the internet by coincidence, so I back ordered like the 10 magazines that existed at that point in time, had them shipped to my parents' place, which is a lot cheaper than shipping them into the States, and then they carried over the border with me in hand luggage coming back from Germany. So, because the shipment from Germany to the States is really not, it's a little bit expensive. But I think they're very worth it, and I have the feeling I'm going to do a similar act of back ordering, give me the last 10 and ship them over at once, or I have to visit my parents again. Any other question? Well, that's it then. Thank you very much for having me again.